Welcome to Financial Strategies with Andrew Agemy in Connecticut and Daniel Agemy in Colorado.
Why do they say that don't put all your eggs in one basket? There's a reason for that. Today, we're going to talk about the power of diversification in retirement. I'm Andrew Agemy.
And I'm Daniel Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today, we're talking about the power of diversification. And AAA, I was talking to somebody the other day, an advisor, who was talking about younger people putting their money into bond funds. And I said, what is the point of that? And he said, it's diversification. You get the S&P on one side and bond funds on the other side. And I said, I think we need to go through what diversification is, because the S&P used to be diversified through sectors. Now it's pretty much tech. And bond funds don't give the diversification that bonds give or corporate credit gives. And so we want to get into how diversification in retirement can be a lifesaver to people who want that stress-free retirement.
Exactly. And especially in retirement, that's an important thing. But across the board, today, things have changed. Things have changed totally from yesteryear, especially when you look about and you study and you find out when diversification first came about, right? The idea was put so much in stocks, individual stocks, right? So much put in individual bonds, put so much in cash, put so much in commodities and or real estate, right? This kind of thing. And then as time has gone on and the amount of mutual funds and ETFs have quantumly expanded mega-wise, it's all about mutual funds in some form or fashion, right? And having so much in individual, it's having so much in stock mutual funds, so much in value-oriented mutual funds, so much in global mutual funds, so much in commodity mutual funds, so much in bond mutual funds. So it's all the problem with having money in mutual funds is that it's the old thing of when the tide goes out, all the ships go down. It doesn't matter if they're big ships or they're small ships or whatever, they're all going down. And the same thing, when you have mutual funds and the stock market comes down, they're all going to go down. It doesn't matter if you're in bond funds, they're still going to go down. They may not go down as fast, like an airplane with small holes in its wing, still going to go down compared to the stock funds, or like an airplane with big holes in its wing, may not go down quite as fast, but it's still going down. And people have just so many times people run their lives, unfortunately, with sound bites. And the old adage of not putting all your eggs in a basket is a very important thing to spread out the risk. But when all of your money's in some form of mutual fund or variable annuity or variable life insurance, guess what? It's all in the market, right? And it's all going to be affected the same way. And if that you drop that basket, the market comes down, they all come down. And that is why it's so important, because when people are in retirement, that can be devastating to their retirement, right?
So AAA, you've been talking about that for a long time. And I would agree with everything that you said, although I would add ETFs into there. You said mutual funds, but I would add ETFs into there too. ETFs, mutual funds, variable annuities. But okay, that's for the typical retiree, someone close to retirement or in retirement. But what's happened now, it's even worse. That was maybe before all this indexation, before all this stuff. Now today it's even worse. It's worse than what you explained. Because it's not even diversifying into stocks, bonds, the market. What you're doing, what most big equity ETFs are, or mutual funds, are, it used to be 7 stocks, 4 of those got shot, and now they're dead, and now it's 3, but it's really 1, NVIDIA, right? And so all these equity ETFs are basically overpowered. Unless you own an equally weighted ETF, you could own diversified stock mutual funds, diversified stock ETFs, and all of them own the same top 7 stocks. And so your whole portfolio, or not your whole, but let's say 25 to 30% of your portfolio is in these 7 stocks, even though you think you're diversified through 27 different mutual funds or whatever it may be, or variable annuity plus this, plus that. And that's the problem, is people are not checking what's actually in the ETFs they're owning. Now, some people could build a very good diversified portfolio with ETFs or mutual funds. It's difficult to do, but we're talking about owning individual companies or gold or real estate. So you know what you own and you know what the cash flows are backing that up, not just collecting funds. And that's what you call the disease of ease.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right, Daniel. And I'm glad that you pointed out with ETFs, because I said that in passing, but that's a very important thing to do, is to bring that out very large. It's not just mutual funds, but ETFs of a form of mutual funds. And a lot of people are using ETFs today. And they would say, I'm sure they would say, oh, I'm not using mutual funds, I'm using ETFs. And because you know how people are, Daniel. And that's what we're talking about, because our show is a show for those people that not just don't know, but they don't know and they want to know. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that don't know and they don't want to know. And that's what's so egregious, right? And they just go along. It's a herd mentality and they do what they want to do. And for those people who are listening that don't really care, don't want to know, that's fine. They're still going to learn something, right? But those people that really want to learn, well, they're going to get some really good that it's just so amazing to me, because what we offer people is information and services and help that normally people with tens of millions of dollars would have. Those people that don't have tens of millions of dollars don't necessarily get what Financial Strategies is offering in regard to this information. You're listening to Financial Strategies with Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is the power of diversification in retirement. And we're talking about why it's important not to put all your eggs in one basket. We've got some good stuff coming for you, but today the paper that we have for you to be able to help you with this is called Harnessing the Power of Diversification. It goes along right with this show. And it's not just why it's so important to have it, but what you can do about it. And that's what we're going to get into right now. We're just talking about the things, why it's important to diversify and what people are doing out there. But as is typically our nature, is near the end of the show, we're going to be talking about what you can do about that and how you can mitigate your risk on that by diversifying. So you can have that paper for free by calling us at 800-725-7616, 800-7216, Harnessing the Power of Diversification. Just call it Diversification White Paper or paper, and we'll be able to glad to get that out to you at no cost, no obligation. You listen to Financial Strategies because people don't know what people don't know. Glad that you're with us. Daniel, diversification, there's different kinds of diversification. There's what we just talked about is the normal diversification, right? As far as so much in stocks and so much in bonds and those kinds of things. And why bonds are safe compared to stock is because they have guarantees to them. They're contracts, and you know what you're going to get and when you're going to get it in a worst case scenario. But the other kinds of diversifications that I don't think we're going to really get into today, but just so that everybody understands, is there's tax diversification. We're going to talk a little bit about that at some point. But tax diversification. Was that? Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Let's talk about it. I think you've got an interesting paradigm on it.
Okay. All right. There's basically, in my mind, there's three kinds of diversification. Investment diversification, investment portfolio diversification, which was what we were just talking about. Tax diversification, because you can have tax-free, after tax, tax deferred, all these different kinds of things. And it's not about what you make that counts. It's about what you get to keep that counts, right? And then the third kind of diversification is strategy diversification, right? A 20-year-old, 30-year-old is going to have a pure accumulation growth strategy compared to a 70-year-old should be pretty much a distribution with maybe some growth strategy, accumulation strategy, depending what their goals are, what their purposes are. So there's a variety of ways that you can diversify. And when you diversify properly, it's a beautiful thing. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everyone would agree with you, AAA, that diversification is a good thing. The difficulty comes in the definitions, right? Where are you talking about diversifying? Are you talking about collecting funds? Are you talking about you're diversified in all these different sectors, but they're through funds of that own things, which means it's a stock, right? A fund that owns bonds is technically a company that owns bonds. So you own stock in a company that owns bonds.
Exactly.
And so that's not diversification, because that's bonds. There's certain instruments that were not meant to be owned in a fund, right?
Right. And bonds
we
are
talk
one of
about
those.
that with real estate a lot, right? Especially right now, we're not super big fans of owning real estate investment trusts unless there's a special niche or a special management team, because a lot of times they have all the control and you end up with the scraps, with the leftovers.
Right. Yeah.
Or it's a fund that you own that just goes and buys up real estate investment funds. So the real estate stocks are doing the diversification. They're buying, they're managing the real estate. And then you have a fund manager that's just picking like 7 to 12 stocks and putting them in a fund and charging you another fee. That doesn't make sense. And you give up the control. So if you own real estate, which most people do because most people own their house, you already own some real estate. If you own real estate, it makes a lot of sense to own the real estate. And that's true diversification. The stock in real estate can be useful for certain things and certain times, but it's not that diversified. It's just the stocks. If all stocks go down, real estate stocks are going to go down too.
That's right. You're exactly right. And that's why you do it, right? Commodities, you invest in commodities, but if you invest in them in a mutual fund, because it's a mutual fund, it's still going to go down when the market goes down. So it's not going to do you any good. It's not going to give you that diversification. It's a great structured product that Wall Street firms have created so that they can make money. And that's the job of the Wall Street firms, make money if the market goes up, the market goes down, the market goes sideways. But people who are invested in the market, when do they make money? Only when it goes up. But we don't like that. We like people making money all the time. Right? We like people earning money while they sleep. But more on that. But you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew Daniel Agemy. We're having a great show today calling The Power of Diversification in Retirement. And we're glad that you joined us. We have a book that we'd like to give you to be able to help you, educate you further. We're all about education here at Financial Strategies, serving you by educating you. We want to give you a book. No charge, called Common Sense by our friend Michael Easton. Common Sense Income Strategies. This is a way that you can be able to, he'll explain some ways of diversifying that you have not heard about before. Chances are most people don't understand these things, don't even know what they are. When we explain to people that you could get 5-6% even while you're sleeping, even as much as 10% while you're sleeping, that they say, how could you do that? What is that? I've never heard of that. Of course you've never heard of that, and you're not professional. And most professionals don't want to tell you about it because they don't make the money that they're used to by putting you in some mutual funds. And we're going to talk more about fees later. But anyway, call us for this book, Common Sense Income Strategies, 800-725-7616 for your free copy, 800-725-7616. No obligation to the first 5 first-time callers. 800-725-7616. Call now. We'll be right back after this.
Important financial question. Are you feeling confident that you have enough money saved to enjoy a stress-free retirement?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
That's where Retirement Income Source's investment advisory arm comes in. We exist to help you invest your money smartly.
I'm struggling to accept my retirement without a steady paycheck. So can you help me invest into a profitable revenue plan?
Absolutely. We have top advisors nationwide who have a fiduciary obligation to you, helping you generate retirement income.
You're locked on to Financial Strategy with Andrew and Daniel Agemy.
Past few years, I've had the opportunity to go to the Mecum auction in Orlando, Florida in January. And it's really interesting watching. I go in for the education, right? Someday I'll probably sell a car there. I think it's places to sell cars there rather than buy cars there. But anyway, the point is I'm educating myself and doing my due diligence on cars because I'm a gearhead. Been a gearhead since my 12-year older brother put me between the seats of his Mustang GT and said, shift. And when I was 5 years old. So from that, I'm looking at these things, and what they have is they'll have different collections come through. Like I remember this one collection that came through. The guy was selling his whole collection of cars, and there were a myriad of red Fords, right? Red Fords. Now there was mostly 1970-ish Mustangs, Boss 302s and things like that. There was some Broncos and a pickups and a few other things, but they were all red and they were all Fords. there was a little bit of diversification, but not totally. Now I can understand that because that's what I'm recognizing as most people's collections of cars are like in the same kind of thing, where you might have a Mopar collection or all Superbirds and Daytona Chargers or these kinds of things. But then those eclectic ones are frowned upon, where you have all these different cars, where maybe you have an Avante, you have a 1970 Mustang Boss 302, you got a dune buggy in there, you got some custom cars, I hate to say it, Chevys, and whatever, you got some different things in there that you don't know, because like you could pick up an Avante rather inexpensively, and you don't know that maybe that Avante is going to be worth something later on. And that's the whole idea. You don't know today things are worth something, but you don't know what they're going to be worth in the future. So the power of diversification hits all kinds of investing, all kinds of things, not just your retirement, not just your investments, mutual funds and things like that. But the point is, diversifying is key, not putting all your eggs in one basket. I'm Andrew Agemy.
And I'm Daniel Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today, we're talking about the power of diversification in retirement. And AAA, I think that story with the cars is a really good example. You need to have a lot of knowledge. You need to have a lot of experience to build out that car portfolio, that diversified car portfolio. And you need to have a lot of money too to build that out.
Especially today, right?
And that's why ETF and mutual fund investing has become so popular, is because people say, I don't have the knowledge to go pick these individual cars, right? Not really. They're saying it for the individual bonds or stocks, right, or commodities or things like that. So they put it in a fund. And at one point in time, and there are funds, I don't want to beat up fund managers, there are funds that they are experts on. But what's happened is the ETF, especially industry, has gotten so big that the biggest funds are just the best marketers. They're not necessarily the best car pickers. They're not necessarily the best diversifiers, right? Just market the best. And so they're collecting assets. And so between the fact that it's a fund and you don't own the actual physical equity, the actual physical bond backing it up, or the actual physical house, real estate, whatever it may be, you bring in a new risk. But secondly, you have to be careful because there's companies just pushing their funds, not necessarily being the best at what they do. And that's something that I think that illustration you just gave with the cars really brings home.
You know what I think? I think we should start a mutual fund with cars, Daniel, and then we can buy all these cars and people can invest in our mutual fund, and then we'll sell cars and make cars, right? Anyway, all kidding aside, and the thing is, it's about making money, right? These people create these funds and all these different things. Why? Because people will buy them. And if people will buy them, what does that mean? It means that they can make money. In the last few years of the last century, right? All these internet things were coming up to be available. I remember one company had this thing called the Toll Keeper. And what it was to be able to invest in the internet with those places that like internet lines and things that people had to pay a toll in order to use, a fee in order to use. And it was a great concept. But guess what happened in 2000 when the .com crash? It crashed, never came back. I had money in that, unfortunately. I put money in that for all my kids. And basically we lost 99% of the money or thereabouts. And then it was put into something else because it was an idea somebody had to make money, but it didn't make money for the people investing in it. So when we have these structured products and these things that people think of, they make money, but who are they making money for? For the people structuring them and building them, right? So you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is the power of diversification in retirement. And we have this paper, Harnessing the Power of Diversification for You, by calling 800-725-7616, 800-725-7616 for your free copy of Harnessing the Power of Diversification. Call now. You're listening to Financial Strategies. Today's topic is the power of diversification in retirement. We're glad you joined us because people don't know what people don't know. And we're glad you want to know. Daniel, looked like you were going to say something.
Yeah, AAA, I think, again, no one would disagree that diversification is a good idea. It's just, how do people diversify? What do you diversify at? My advisor says, I'm diversified. My advisor says, look at all these different funds that you own. You're diversified. When I ask my advisor about gold, he says it's a bad idea. When I ask my advisors about commodities, he says you don't make any money in commodities. When I ask my advisor about individual bonds, he says they're bad. How do I diversify, AAA?
Fire your advisor. Get somebody that knows something about all these things, right? And we've heard those things before, Daniel. That's the egregious thing is we've heard those comments from people coming in and that we've been able to educate. Some of them become our clients and whatnot, but that's a true story. But there's a key to all of that, which is the fees, right? What are these people making on fees? I just talked with a lady yesterday that actually went through that same thing that what you're talking about. She wanted to buy gold and her advisor didn't know anything about gold. And where we had this long conversation about gold and commodities and that kind of thing so that she could understand if it fit or whatnot in her portfolio and how she should do it. But when I looked at her portfolio, she had like basically all of her money in some form of mutual fund. And the least amount of fee she was paying all in was 1.5% per year, which is egregious, right? The people managing the money were making maybe 0.25% of that 1.5%. And the guy choosing the mutual funds was making 1.25%. And it's, how hard is it to choose a mutual fund? It's as hard as checking a box, right? The disease of ease. It's become so easy for people. Hey, I'm going to go in mutual fund. And that's where that other thing that we saw recently, Daniel, where they said, go into the SP 500 mutual fund. You're almost guaranteed, right?
No, he didn't say almost guaranteed. This advisor or somebody literally said, look at a 30-year chart of the S&P. You can draw 3% out of it a year without running out of money. You're guaranteed 3%. And there is no guarantees. There is no guarantees on the S&P. The dividend is not guaranteed. There's nothing guaranteed. And this lack of diversification we've been talking about is making it worse. Because think about any herd mentality. When you put everybody into a stadium and call fire, what's going to happen? The doors are only so big. If you put everybody in an airplane and you say that it's crashing, what's going to happen? People are going to go crazy and not get out. So now put everyone into ETFs that own the same thing. And if there is an actual real recession or an actual problem in markets like have happened throughout history, we have not had one since 2009. And people think that we've solved the issue in the markets and there will be no more. And I say, look at history. If you think the S&P is guaranteed to earn you 3% a year or whatever number you want to make up, I hear 7 or 8% all the time.
Right.
I have a chart to show you, and it will show you actual S&P returns from, we looked back to the 80s, or from the 1800s, from the 1800s, and there's multiple periods of time where it takes between 21 years to 13 years of no earnings. And if that's your retirement, that's a big problem to have 21 years to 13 years. And it's only gotten worse since then because the diversification in the S&P is worse than it's ever been. I shouldn't say worse than ever. I think in the around 62, when the Nifty 50 was a big deal, I think it was on part of that. And after that, you had almost 20 years, 15 to 20 years where there was no growth.
Yeah. And people might say, well, you guys sure are doomsdayers and negative about this. Well, all we're trying to do is we're trying to help people to understand things that they're not being told by the talking heads that are out there, whether it's their advisors, it's the television shows or radio shows or whatever. You got to look at things and you got to think about things with your own perspective and learn about things. You don't need to know everything that we know, everything that advisors know, but you need to be able to understand how to make good decisions and how have the information you made to make a good decision. That's what we're trying to do on Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is the power of diversification in retirement. We're glad you're with us, but we're going to have to take a break here. And before we go, we have a book that we'd like to put in your hands by our friend Mike Eastman, CPA and PFS. Common Sense Income Strategies, which Mike goes through and explains some different things about how to invest in things that you probably don't know how to invest in and what to invest in, and things that can pay you while you're sleeping. And so we'd love to put this book in your hand for free to the next 5 first-time callers at 800-725-7616. 800-725-7616. Call now.
Do you have any questions for me about retirement income source?
I just want to make sure I can invest well enough to have enough income, enjoy my retirement.
We build a custom retirement plan based around your income and goals.
How do I know I can trust you?
Building trust does take time, but our investment advisory arm is comprised of fiduciaries, which means our obligation is to you. So you can enjoy your retirement with a little more income stability.
I'm in.
That's 2 out of 3.
This is Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy.
AAA, we take risks every day, right? I remember back years ago really being into cliff jumping and jumping off these high cliffs into the water. And I had friends that seemed to be fearless. They would just run off of a cliff and jump into anything. They wouldn't go down and check out what was in the water or how deep the water was. And my thing was always, I would never jump off anything without me personally going down into the water, swimming around, making sure there's no sticks, making sure the water is deep enough, making sure there's no rocks I can't see. Because we're talking 50 to 70 foot cliffs, right?
Yeah. Wow.
You jump off that and hit some sticks that could be the end of things, right? And so understanding the risk, right? You know that there's risk, but if you just jump off and say, I saw somebody jump off here, so it's okay. Maybe they jumped a one inch one way or the other. Or last year we jumped off of here. Who knows what's changed since last year? Things change.
That's right.
We need to understand those risks. I'm Daniel Agemy.
And I'm Andrew Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is the power of diversification in retirement. And we're talking about not putting all your eggs in one basket. And Daniel, so what's that got to do with diversification? That's a good point, but fit it in.
There's risk. There's risk in our lives. We get in our cars and we drive down the street, right? Risks don't always seem accurate. Like a lot of people have more fear of flying than they do driving, but driving statistically is far more dangerous than flying. And so we're constantly calculating these risks. There's no way to take risk out of our lives, just like there's no way to take risk out of investing. Mm-hmm. The difficulty is to understand the risk, and diversification can take down the risk that you have in investing, right? Mm-hmm. Everything has some type of risk. You can buy gold, there's still some type of risk. You can buy US Treasury bonds or notes or bills. There's still some risk involved. Even though it might be a very low risk, it might be a different risk. It might be your purchasing power risk. It might be something you haven't thought of. It might be, if you're Russia, them just confiscating your treasury, right? There's always risk. And so diversification is meant to mitigate risk. In fact, if you have proper diversification, it can turn one risk into a benefit, right? We talk about that a lot with some of the monetary hedges that we like to use in the portfolios, where if there's a government, a policy mistake, if there's chaos in the world, your portfolio actually benefits from it. And that's able to add, that's true diversification, as we would say, right? That's a true diversification, where you put something in there that is not a big enough piece to really materially impact your portfolio. But when those long tail events happen, when the crazy things happen, it actually benefits your portfolio, and it can do so in an asymmetrical return where it benefits your whole retirement. And that's why I brought up the risk, because we're taking on risk. So it's understanding your risk versus return. And when I'm having conversations with people, they'll say, I'm aggressive or I want to take on risk. And I say, what does that mean? Does that mean you want to buy the least diversified S&P 500 at all-time highs or close to all-time highs at valuations that are close to all-time highs to get a 9% over 150 years averaged return? That doesn't sound like a good risk-adjusted return, especially when there's things in credit where companies, good solid companies, will pay you 8%. Pay you 8%, not hope that it goes up 8%. They will pay you. It could still go up potentially, but they will pay you 8%.
While you're sleeping.
So looking at the risk versus return. Now, if this is the bottom of the great financial crisis and you're talking about buying the S&P, that's a different story, right? So looking at what the current risk versus risk and return is not always the same investment. You talked about the tech bubble bust. And Cisco is a perfect company I like to use. Everyone looked at that company and said, this is an amazing company. And they made a ton of money. It was a great company. It is a great company today. It's still around. They still make a ton of money.
Yeah.
You can't get on the internet without this company.
Right.
But people paid too much for it. And it took, 24, 25 years for it to get back to its peak.
Wow.
So just because it's a good company doesn't mean it's a good investment. And that's where looking at the risk-adjusted return and diversification really can make a huge difference to a retirement portfolio.
Right. And just real quick, right, with the Sharpe ratio, you can put different, when you get the right diversifications of things, it can increase your return and lower your risk. That shows it beautifully how that works. And you could even, it's amazing, even with treasuries, you could increase your return and you can lower your risk. Even though the treasuries are considered to be very safe, you can still decrease your risk a little bit with that, with the power of diversification, because you put everything in one basket and there's problems with that. So anyway, I think people are getting the idea about this, and we will go on with that. But today you're listening to Financial Strategies with Daniel Agemy, and we have a paper that we'd like to give you called Protect Yourself from the Dangers of Inflation, right? That's one of the reasons why you need to diversify properly, be able to stay up with inflation, ahead of taxation, these kinds of things, because everybody says, oh, just put your money in the market to stay up with inflation. That doesn't always work. That's the simple answer. That's not the extended answer. And so you need to be able to protect yourself. This paper will help you understand that. You can call now for free, 800-725-7616 for your paper to help you understand how to protect yourself from inflation. Call now. You listen to Financial Strategies. Today's topic is the power of diversification in retirement, because people don't know what people don't know. So, Daniel, we started earlier on about taxes, and taxes are a very important thing to be able to diversify with how you're registering your money, because $1,000 that you take out of an IRA is how much in your pocket? $700 maybe by the time you pay state and
depends
federal
how much
tax.
the government wants.
Well, what they're taking today, right? And it's real interesting when you say that, because for those that can see this on video, and the federal government, they say, how much did you make? You made $100,000. Okay, we'll pay it. Except just pay us 22% or 12% on $60,000, right? Whereas like the states, at least the state of Connecticut does it this way. New York does it like the federal government. The state of Connecticut says, how much did you make? $100,000? We'll pay us 6% on $100,000. I know people who have paid more tax to the state of Connecticut this past year than they did to the federal government with the same income. Is that crazy or what? Even though the percentage is lower, what is it that on? But that's the point, is that you need to be able to diversify with what you're doing there. You need to be able to diversify tax regarding your taxes and registrations. How much is pre-tax in 401ks or IRAs? How much is tax-free in Roth IRAs or life insurance? How much is tax deferred in non-IRA annuities and such, right? How much are you paying tax on every year? Well, that's an important thing to be able to look at and to diversify so that you're going to be in good shape no matter what the tax laws are, right? That's the big key. Yeah.
We are a big proponent of trying to get money into the tax-free bucket. And a lot of people, especially CPAs, I shouldn't say a lot. There's some that don't believe in that because they think you'll never get the money back.
Right.
And I could give you an example. If in 2019 you did a conversion, right?
From IRA to a Roth.
To Roth. And you paid 22, 24% even on it.
Okay.
Now it would be more because you pay state taxes too, right? But say you paid 30, 35% on it. Well,
one time. Yep.
Basically from then to now, because of just inflation, not because you bought a good company, not because you're investing in dividends that are paying you, just basically all assets have gone up about 40% since then because of inflation. If you haven't gone up 40%, you got a problem. So if you did that, you'd be basically back to where you were. Now, it wouldn't be exact because there wasn't as much working for you, but it'd be close, right? You'd be close to back to where you were just by inflation. But now it's all in a tax-free bucket instead of the taxable bucket. And now it can keep compounding going forward. But on the other hand, it's specific to each individual, because if you're someone that really cares about charitable causes and you want to give a lot of money away, it doesn't make sense to convert all your money because you can give that away out of your IRAs tax-free.
Right.
And so it really depends. There's all kinds of strategies, and that's why what you're talking about is so important. But the tax buckets, that diversification is based on individuals, on what they care about, on what they're going to spend the money on, what they want the retirement to look like, if they're going to have big purchases or if they're going to be able to live off the income. It depends on so many different things. And these are individual conversations you need to have with yourself, or you need to have with the person advising you on your money. You need a personal CFO to help you understand how that can affect you.
Yeah, exactly. And Daniel, that is so important, because you have a single person that has no kids, they have no family, versus a couple who has a bunch of kids, right? And what they want to do with their money after they die is two totally separate things, generally speaking. Yeah. And for that single person, it may not be worthwhile to do a conversion, because why? If they, at least with the married couple, if they do a conversion, it would benefit them during their lifetime, either one of them or both of them or whatever. But then when they pass away, that's going to go to their kids on a tax-free basis. And so that's a whole different thing. So individualization, customization is huge. And if you want to hear more about that, listen to our show that talked about fast food or a boutique restaurant, right? You listen to Financial Strategies. I'm Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is the power of diversification in retirement. We have a book word before we go to break here that we'd love to give you to the next 5 first-time callers, Common Sense Income Strategies. This is going to help you be able to understand some of these ways that you can mitigate this risk, that you can diversify for retirement, that you can do some of these different things that we're talking about in a far more precise manner than what we're able to do on the show today. But we'd love to put this in your hands so that education can continue. 800-725-7616 for your copy of the book, Common Sense Income Strategies. Next 5 first-time callers. Call now.
Time for some tough questions for these financial advisors. What makes Retirement Income Source different from other financial?
Our extensive experience generating investment income quickly so you can have financial peace of mind, navigate your retirement smoothly, and have more time to spend with family and doing the things you love.
We gotta talk to these guys. We're done here.
You're locked on to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy.
So individual bonds are a contract that have guarantees to them, but they're not perfect. Some, depending upon the company, companies can go out of business, but guess what? At least you're the first one in line behind the IRS. When they do go out of, when a company does go bankrupt, to get assets to the company. So one day, many years ago, I had to call up one of our clients and say, one of your $5,000 bonds went bad. And we'd like to diversify, put it in a lot of different things. And that's why it was only 5,000, because we had a lot of different bonds. We didn't have just a few. We had a lot of different ones, plus a lot of other things in there besides. And I said, I'm sorry to say this bond went bad. And he said, Andrew, I'm looking at my account and I don't see that it's worth $5,000 less. And I said, that's because we did so well with the diversification with everything else that you don't feel it. But it is there. And then later on, we were able to get some assets of the company to take that back. But I'm Andrew Agemy.
And I'm Daniel Agemy, and you're listening to Financial Strategies. Today, we're talking about diversification in retirement. And AAA, today we're talking about true diversification, not necessarily collecting ETFs or mutual funds so that you're diversified, or even collecting stocks, right? Just because you own a lot of stocks, you could own 175 stocks. That doesn't mean you're diversified, right? You could own 500 stocks. That doesn't mean you're actually diversified. So some people get a large number of something confused with being diversified. Now, how does the corporate bond have to do with diversification?
When we're talking about the things to diversify into, when we're talking about investable assets, let's say, especially IRA assets, right? What can you invest in? The types of things. There's stocks and everything. Everybody knows about stocks and stock funds, ETFs, right? And basically, they're the stock market. They go up with the stock market. They come down, generally speaking, with the stock market, right? They're the stock market. But then there's bonds. Individual bonds are another item. And people have heard how bonds are safe compared to stock. And they are if you're using individual bonds. Now, mutual bond funds go back to the stock department. Like you said earlier, Daniel, when you own a bond fund, all you own is a stock of a company that owns bonds. You don't own bonds. The thing that makes bonds safe is the ability to hold them to maturity and you get your money back. Like a CD with that. It's a contract. Anybody out there in our listening audience who has or has had a mortgage on their house understands contracts. A bank gave you money, loaned you money, and they knew that worst case scenario, or I guess best case scenario, how much money they were going to make. They knew worst case scenario when they were going to get their money back, and all these kinds of things, because it was contractual. And if you didn't keep that contract, they were going to take your house, take your equity, they're going to ruin your credit. And so they had all the leverage on that standpoint. Now, when you buy an individual bond, you're the bank. And all those things are in your favor rather than the people loaning the money from that standpoint. And so that's why they're safe compared to stocks, because you have guarantees, you have promises, you have a contract. Where the stock market, all you have is hope. And when you're hoping when you're 20 or 30 or maybe even 40, that's one thing. But when you start getting into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, hope, you just hope for the next day if you're 90 years old. But hope is not a retirement plan. So stocks, bonds, commodities. Commodities can include a lot of things. In my mind, commodities are like tangible assets: gold, real estate, wheat, pig bellies, pork bellies, right? Silver, oil, digital currency, streaming companies as a way to diversify a bunch of commodities, these kinds of things. Why? Because if you own true commodities and the stock market goes down and the commodities don't, then you're able to make some money, right? If you knew how to invest in commodities like wheat and the stock market goes down and wheat actually does well, you could actually make some money even though everybody else is losing money. That's the idea. And then really the fourth segment or area primarily would be cash. Having cash. What now? Because we don't get anything for cash. Right now, we're getting 5% for cash, making 5% every year on cash, and that's a good thing, right? But sometimes you need just cash, whether it's in your house, it's in your bank, right? Depending what you want it for. I talked with somebody yesterday. It was pretty cool. She says, Andrew, I have a book at home that with the cut out inside, and every time I get my paycheck, I take $100 and I put it in the book. And I've got about $6,000 at home in this book. I said, that's a pretty cool idea. But you need cash as a piece of diversifying. Why? Because sometimes cash is king. And with what's happening in our monetary system right now, you can see how banks are getting tighter. How long does it take for a check to clear these days? The bigger the check, the longer it takes, right? $100,000 check can take a week and a half to clear. What happens if you need that money? You can't get to it. So you have to plan for how you can have the cash that you need when you need it. And that's why I say sometimes you might need it at home. Sometimes you might need it in the bank. If you have it in the bank, might not release it. I know I'm very familiar with a credit union that will only give you $1,500 of cash a day. But cash is another way of diversifying. And the key is having a good balance of these things to be able to work for you rather than against you, to be in a good position no matter what happens. That's the key, right? There's a lot of people out there investing in those stocks and those mutual funds and S&P 500. And as long as the market goes up, they're going to do well. And we know, and that's great, right? The problem is, what is that going to be worth when they want to sell it? Because the market goes three directions, right? Goes up, down, and sideways. And if they want to take it out and it's going down or sideways, they've got a real problem. Right. But what we like to do for people, and when we're talking about the power of diversification, when people have the right things and the right mixes, they've always got something working for them so that they're in good shape no matter what. And the thing is, I got to say this, right? Like during COVID, where the market came down, the fixed income market came down, the bond market came down. So when the bond market came down, you could buy a $10,000 bond for $8,000. That's on sale. That was a great opportunity. But if you didn't have any money, you couldn't do that. Guess what? We had some things that didn't come down at all. We took money out of those things that didn't come down. And the whole thing about investing is buy low, sell high. So basically those things were high, and we took that cash and we bought low, and then those things after COVID happened have come up, and people have made a lot of money to where we have some clients that have made 10% a year net of fees over past several years. So that's pretty cool stuff. You're listening to Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy. Today's topic is power of diversification in retirement. And we have a paper that we'd love to give you today to go along with the show. It's called Protect Yourself from the Dangers of Inflation. It's important to stay ahead of inflation. And this paper will give you some tips on how to be able to do that so that you can be proper diversified if you don't have somebody that's doing it for you properly. Call now, 800-725-7616 for your free copy. The paper on dangers of inflation. Protecting yourself. Next call for that. You're listening to Financial Strategies, because people don't know what people don't know. Daniel, we have just a few minutes left here to wrap up this show today. Did I leave out anything, or you got anything that's...
No, I think you explained that very good. We all know there's no such thing as a free lunch, but I think the closest thing to a free lunch is true diversification, because it actually lowers your risk and increases the certainty of your returns by proper diversification. And so again, there's no such thing as a free lunch, but diversification is really the closest thing to that, because it's one of the most misunderstood things when we're talking about diversification. Exactly how you were explaining it. When whatever's going on in the world affects one thing, it actually benefits something else. That's diversification. That Sharpe ratio you're talking about, where you add in strategic assets, we call them a lot monetary hedges that we like to add to people's portfolio because it complements the fixed income. So fixed income, we like to do a lot of corporate credit, right? We like to do a lot of things that pay you an income. And the biggest risk with that stuff is that governments will just continue to print money like crazy and you'll lose purchasing power. When you add in the monetary hedges, it increases that Sharpe ratio. And what it does is it actually allows you to benefit, not 1 for 1 or 2 for 2, more like 5 to 10 to 1, depending on which monetary hedges you're choosing, so that you actually benefit from that. We don't want that to happen, but we want protection from that, right, AAA?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we talk about like this Roth conversion and everything too. And for those in our listener audience, if you want to hear some success stories with how things have happened, just real quickly here, we have one of our clients ended up doing a larger conversion than what he wanted to, had to pay more tax than what he wanted to pay. Thought at the time that it hurt him. But the very next year, what we were able to do with that was he is very happy today because he made big money on that deal, and it's all tax-free. And I just talked with him the other day, Daniel, and he was like smiling ear to ear on that one. He was very happy. It's sometimes hard to get him to smile about that kind of stuff. That was great. He's probably listening now. Anyway, that's thing there. And then we have some other success stories. And if you have questions, let us know what they are, because we'd be glad to answer those on the air for you. If you want to know some of these success stories, let us know about that. We'll be glad to be able to share with you on that. The one thing that I was thinking of, Daniel, I always have that word, I have a mental block when we're talking about diversification. And you haven't said this word in this thing, and I think we need to get it in here, which is a true diversification is when that things are, what's that thing I have in my
reversely correlated, right? You want things that are not correlated with each other. So the more correlation you have, the more is what you were talking about. When the sea goes out, all ships, when the tide goes out, all ships come down.
Those are all
So you want things that are negatively correlated with each other so that your portfolio can always perform. And I think one more thing with the diversification AAA is people are unique. We don't all drive the same cars. We don't all wear the same clothes. So thinking a 60-40 portfolio or thinking that all bonds or all stocks or just buy the S&P is not going to fit, or all tax-free money or all non-tax-free pre-tax money is going to fit. You're an individual and you need, right, out to the listening audience, you're an individual and you need a portfolio. You need a retirement strategy that fits you, the things you like to do, the things you want to do in retirement, and fits your emotional risk tolerance. Not necessarily like I'm aggressive, I'm not aggressive, but what you can handle internally and what you can't handle internally. Right. Because that's when people make the worst decisions, when they sell out of a market at the bottom, is because they were in the wrong thing to start with. Right. They emotionally couldn't handle that. And so everybody's different. So there's no problem with that. It's just designing that diversified portfolio to fit your unique situation. It's crazy to think about these cookie cutter approaches that people get put into because we're all different. We're all different and we all need a little bit different portfolio, a little bit different retirement strategy.
Exactly. You're exactly right, Daniel. Good word. That's a good word. Hey, just looking at this map behind me and was saying, where in the world? Where in the world's Andrew or Daniel today? Andrew's in Connecticut today, but always traveling about. We tried to, as in Detroit, Motor City last week that I wanted to record a show, but it didn't come off. But Daniel.
And I was in Connecticut the week before, but we missed 2 shows in a row.
We'll work on that, right? So you listen to Financial Strategies with Andrew Daniel Agemy because people don't know what people don't know. Listen to Financial Strategies and you'll know. Today's topic is, or has been, the power of diversification in retirement. We have a book that we want to give you in parting today. Now, let me just say, for those of our clients listening, when I say the first 5 first-time callers get the book, that doesn't include you. You guys can have these books, okay? So if you're a client, you're listening to the show, you can just call up and you ask for the book. We're glad to get you the book, right? But for those people, for our listeners, we're looking for the first 5 first-time callers to get this book, Common Sense Income Strategies, by our friend Michael Easom. Yours for free by calling 800-725-7616. We'll help you understand how to put together a better diversified portfolio than what you probably have now. So call now, 800-725-7616. The next 5 first-time callers who are not clients, if you're a client, call anyway and get your free book. So we're looking forward to you joining us again next time for Financial Strategies with Andrew and Daniel Agemy, because people don't know what people don't know.